Captain Alina West stared out into the endless abyss of space, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the control panel in front of her. The stars outside twinkled like distant memories, but she wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about the ship, the forgotten vessel. A massive alien warship, abandoned in a remote corner of the galaxy. Most people would have passed it by, dismissing it as just another wreck. But Alina wasn't like most people. She saw opportunity where others saw danger. And this ship, left to rot by its original owners, was full of potential. Her crew was a mix of misfits and outcasts, just like her. They had seen their share of battles, but nothing like this. They had always managed to scrape by on the scraps of the galaxy, scavenging what they could. But this was different. There were rumors about the ship. Some said it was cursed. Others said it had been part of a failed war effort. No one really knew for sure. But when Alina received a distress signal from the ship, she knew it was too big of a chance to pass up. "Captain, we've reached the coordinates," said Jax, her communications officer, his voice breaking through the quiet hum of the ship. "Looks like we found it." Alina leaned forward, studying the ship on the screen. It was a massive, twisted hulk of metal, floating lifelessly in the void. Its once pristine hull was now riddled with dents and scorch marks, and its engines were cold, unresponsive. It had been abandoned for years, maybe longer, but there was something about it that drew Alina in. "Prepare to board," she ordered. Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of excitement that even she couldn't hide. This was the kind of discovery that could change everything for them. The crew went to work, preparing their gear and getting ready for the boarding operation. They had no idea what they would find on the ship, if anything at all. But they were ready for anything. Alina had faced danger before. She wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. The airlock hissed as the door opened, and the crew stepped onto the cold, dark hull of the alien ship. The silence was overwhelming, the kind of silence that seemed to press in on them from all sides. It felt wrong, like they were walking through a ghost ship. "Stay close," Alina ordered, her voice low. "If this thing is still operational, we don't want to trigger anything we can't control." They moved cautiously, their boots echoing in the empty corridors. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols that none of them recognized. Some parts of the ship were intact, but others were in ruin, as if something had violently torn through them. The ship felt ancient, almost alive in its own way. Alina led the way to the central control room. It was dark, the lights flickering as they stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay. She moved to the main console, her fingers brushing over the controls. Nothing happened at first. The ship's systems were dead, like a body that had long since stopped breathing. "Try the power systems," Alina said, turning to one of her engineers. "See if you can get anything to work." As the engineer worked, Alina looked around the room. It was clear this was no ordinary ship. The design was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The technology was advanced, alien in every sense of the word. And yet, it felt familiar, like they could almost understand it, if only they tried hard enough. "Captain," one of the crew members called out, breaking Alina from her thoughts. "We've got something." Alina turned to find the engineer staring at a flickering screen. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. The engineer tapped a few buttons, and suddenly, a low hum filled the room. The lights flickered again, and then, for the first time since they boarded, the ship came to life. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and Alina could feel a strange, almost electric sensation in the air. "It's working," the engineer said, sounding amazed. "We've got power." Alina felt a rush of excitement. They had done it. They had brought the ship back to life. But as the hum grew louder, something in her gut told her that this wasn't going to be as simple as flipping a switch. There was something about the ship that felt off. "Let's get the systems online," she said, forcing the unease from her voice. "We need to see what this ship can do." But as the ship's systems powered up, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they had just awakened something far more dangerous than they realized. She glanced at her crew, their faces a mix of excitement and uncertainty. She had always trusted her instincts, and right now, her instincts were screaming that they had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The ship was awake, and it was waiting for them to make the next move. Whatever that was, Alina wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. They had just unleashed something that would change everything. And they weren't the only ones who were interested in what lay hidden inside the ship's walls. The hum of the ship's systems grew louder, as if the vessel itself was awakening from a long, troubled slumber. Alina stood at the control panel, her hands poised above the alien interface. Her crew was scattered around the room, staring at the ship's main systems with a mixture of awe and apprehension. There was power now, unseen, ancient power, but the question remained, what was it capable of? Captain, Jax's voice interrupted her thoughts. I'm getting something on the long-range scanners. Another ship. It's coming toward us. Alina's heart skipped a beat. The last thing they needed was unwanted visitors. They had just woken up a warship. What if they weren't the only ones who had been searching for it? Can you identify them? Alina asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The anticipation in the air was thick, almost tangible. Not yet, but they're closing fast, Jax replied, his voice tight with urgency. All crew, report to your stations. We may have company, Alina ordered, her gaze never leaving the control panel. She was trying to make sense of the ship's newfound energy, but there was a part of her that already knew what was coming. This ship wasn't just an ancient relic, it was a weapon, and the universe would stop at nothing to claim it. The crew scrambled to their positions, moving with practiced precision. Alina could feel the heat rising in her chest. She wasn't afraid, but her mind raced through the possibilities. Could they defend themselves against whatever was coming? And what would happen if the ship's power could be harnessed? There was no way to know, but they were about to find out. A low rumble echoed through the corridors of the alien ship, and the lights flickered again, as if responding to the approaching threat. Alina's eyes darted to the viewport, but there was nothing there yet, just the black void of space, stretching out in all directions. Captain, one of her engineers, Maya, called out from the back of the room. The ship's eye is active. I don't know how to explain it, but it's reacting to us, almost like it's listening to us. Alina frowned. What do you mean, listening? It's like it's aware of us. Every move we make, every command we issue. It's as if it's waiting for us to tell it what to do, Maya said, her voice filled with both wonder and concern. Alina's mind raced. The ship was alive in a way that no machine should be. Was it responding to the crew, or was it manipulating them? She had heard stories of ancient AI, creations so powerful they could bend entire civilizations to their will. But this was something different, something much darker. Before Alina could respond, a loud, unmistakable beep sounded across the control room, snapping her out of her thoughts. Jax's voice came through, full of urgency. Captain, they're locking weapons onto us. It's not a warning shot. They're going to fire. Alina's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to retreat, to turn the ship around and flee. But that wouldn't work. Not now. Not after everything they had done to bring this weapon to life. She clenched her fists, her gaze hardening. We don't run, she said, her voice low but firm. Activate the ship's weapon systems. We're not giving them the chance to destroy us. We'll fight back. Maya and the engineers scrambled to interface with the alien systems. The room buzzed with activity as the crew worked furiously to prepare for battle. The hum of the ship grew louder, almost deafening, as though it too was bracing for impact. Weapon systems online, Maya reported, her face pale but resolute. But I don't know what we're going up against. We're not even sure how to aim these things. Alina didn't hesitate. Fire on their lead ship. Full power. There was a moment of silence, And then the ship shook as a barrage of energy beams erupted from its core. Alina barely had time to blink before the alien ship ahead of them erupted in a blinding flash. She watched, her heart pounding, as the ship disintegrated under the sheer force of the blast. The crew stared at the aftermath in shock. The alien ship, gone, reduced to nothing in a matter of seconds. Alina's breath caught in her throat. "We did it," she whispered, though her words felt hollow. The power of the ship had been unleashed, and it had been more destructive than she ever imagined. But as the debris from the destroyed vessel drifted into the blackness of space, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had taken their first step into a much larger war, one they hadn't fully prepared for. The enemy would return. They always did. And when they did, the stakes would be even higher. Alina knew it. The crew knew it. And the ship, this weapon they had awoken, knew it too. The ship's hum reverberated through the control room like a living heartbeat. Alina stared out at the debris field from the destroyed alien vessel, her mind working furiously. The power they had just unleashed had been immense, but the enemy's ship was only the beginning. If others were out there, they would come for them, especially now that the weapon had been awakened. "Status update," Alina commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos that churned inside her. "We're tracking more ships on the sensors," Jax replied, his voice tight. 3. No, 4 more. They're closing in fast. Alina's stomach sank. 4 more ships. The first one had barely been a warm-up. She had no illusions about what was coming next. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a battle for control over a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "How much time do we have?" Alina asked, trying to force the dread out of her voice. "Maybe 5 minutes before they're within range," Jax answered, his eyes glued to the screen. "They're communicating. It looks like they're coordinating an attack." Alina turned to Maya, who was still busy at the controls, her fingers flying over the alien interface. The ship was alive, in a way, responding to their commands and the actions of the enemy. But how much control did they really have over it? "Can we upgrade the weapon systems?" Alina asked. "We need to hit them before they hit us." Maya looked up from her screen, worry etched across her face. "I can try to increase the output, but the systems aren't designed for it. It could overheat, burn out entirely. We might not get a second shot." Alina clenched her jaw, considering their options. They didn't have the luxury of time to debate. The enemy was coming, and they had no choice but to fight. "Do it," Alina ordered. "Push the systems to their limit." Maya nodded, quickly going to work. The crew could feel the shift in the air. The tension was palpable, each member of the crew silently preparing for what was coming. Alina felt the weight of command on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every single person on her ship, every single soul who had entrusted her with their lives. She couldn't afford to fail them. "Weapon systems are charging," Maya said, her voice tight. "It'll be ready in a minute." The ship trembled beneath their feet as another blast of energy surged through the hull. Alina's eyes snapped to the screen, watching as the enemy ships neared. 4 of them now. The odds were not in their favor. "Activate shields," Alina commanded, her voice calm but firm. The crew sprang into action. Moments later, a shimmering barrier of energy surrounded the ship, glowing softly against the void of space. The ship's hum grew louder, and Alina could feel the alien vessel responding, almost eager, as if it understood the danger. The power coursing through its systems was unnatural alien, but it was their only chance. "Ready, Captain," Maya called out. "Weapon systems at full charge." Alina nodded. Fire. A massive pulse of energy shot out from the ship's core, slicing through space like a comet. The blast hit the lead enemy ship with devastating force. The impact was so powerful that Alina could feel the shockwave even inside the command room. The enemy ship erupted into a ball of flame, its fragments scattered into the cold emptiness. But they weren't done yet. "Incoming fire," Jack shouted, eyes wide. They're firing back. The enemy ships didn't hesitate. A barrage of energy beams lit up space, hurtling toward the cruise ship. Alina gritted her teeth, watching as the shields absorbed the first few blasts, their energy flickering dangerously. The next round of fire would test their limits. Hold on, Alina barked, bracing herself against the seat. She could feel the tension in the air as her crew worked to keep the ship together. Another blast hit, and the ship shuddered violently, the hull creaking under the strain. Shields holding at 60%, Maya reported. But we can't take many more hits like that. Alina's mind raced. They had only one shot left. The weapon was ready, but the crew was running out of time. Prepare to fire again, Alina said, her voice cutting through the noise. This time, make it count. Maya's fingers flew over the controls once more, and the ship hummed with energy. The pulse weapon was charging again, but the enemy was almost upon them. Alina could see their ships closing in, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Now, Alina commanded. The ship's weapon unleashed another blast of overwhelming force, brighter than a star, brighter than anything Alina had ever seen. The blast collided with one of the enemy ships, and the explosion was so powerful that it sent a shockwave through space itself, disrupting the trajectories of the other ships. Pieces of the destroyed vessel drifted into the void, but the remaining enemy ships didn't stop. They were relentless. 2 more to go, Jack said, his voice grim. And they're preparing to fire. Alina knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast. They had taken down 2 of them, but it wouldn't be enough. Not if the enemy was as relentless as they seemed. They needed more power, more fire, more of whatever the ship could give. Push it, Alina said to Maya, her voice almost a growl. Give us everything the ship has. Now. Maya hesitated for a split second before slamming her hand down on the console. Okay, Captain. Here goes nothing. The ship's hum shifted again, turning into a low, ominous growl. The energy in the room crackled as the weapon powered up to its maximum capacity. The remaining enemy ships fired, but Alina didn't flinch. They weren't going to win this battle by playing it safe. Fire, Alina screamed. Another blast shot out from the ship, brighter and faster than before. This time, the shockwave was enough to send the remaining enemy ships into disarray. The blast struck the next ship with deadly precision, tearing it apart as it struggled to respond. The last enemy ship tried to retreat, but it was already too late. The weapon fired again, catching it in a blaze of pure energy. Silence filled the control room as the crew watched the last ship disintegrate before their eyes. Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was over. For now. The crew stared at the aftermath, stunned by what they had just done. They had survived. They had conquered. But Alina knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Something far larger than they could imagine was coming for them, and they had no idea how to prepare for it. But there was one thing she was certain of. They weren't alone anymore. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was willing to fight and win against anything that came for them. You said. Alina stood in the command room, her eyes scanning the aftermath of the battle. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. The crew, still reeling from the sudden onslaught and their miraculous victory, was a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. The ship, this ancient alien war vessel, had done what no human-made ship had ever done before. It had destroyed 4 enemy vessels in less than an hour. But despite the initial victory, Alina could feel a chill settling over her. This wasn't over. The warships they'd destroyed were just the beginning. There was something bigger out there, a force that wouldn't stop until it claimed what they had just awakened. Captain, Jax spoke up, his voice steady but laced with worry. We've wiped out their fleet, but we're not alone out here. There are more ships coming. Alina's heart dropped. How many? At least 20, Jax answered, his hands flying over the console as he analyzed the incoming signals. They're spreading out, moving toward us from all directions. Alina ran her fingers through her hair, tension building in her chest. The enemy wasn't giving up, but she couldn't let fear take hold. They had this weapon, this incredible ship that had just turned the tide in their favor. If they could harness it, if they could control it, they might stand a chance. "We need to move," Alina said, her voice hard. "Get us out of here. Find a safe position, somewhere we can regroup." The crew sprang into action, maneuvering the ship into a new position in the depths of space. But Alina knew the truth. It wouldn't matter where they went. The enemies they'd just faced would soon regroup, and they would come for them again. What they needed was not to run, but to fortify their position, to prepare for the next battle. "We need to learn more about this ship," Alina continued, her eyes flicking to Maya. "How does it work? What else can it do?" Maya hesitated for a moment before responding. "I've been trying to access more of its systems, Captain. There are layers of data I can't even begin to understand. It's as if the ship has been waiting for someone to come along and unlock its true power." Alina turned her gaze to the vast blackness outside the ship, her mind working at full speed. The ship had been abandoned, left to rot in the depths of space. But now it was theirs. It was more than just a weapon. It was a tool, a force capable of changing the galaxy's balance of power. And right now, they were holding the key. "We need to figure out how to use this ship to its fullest potential," Alina said, her voice low but firm. "If we can do that, we'll be unstoppable." Maya nodded but couldn't hide the unease in her eyes. "I'll keep trying to interface with the systems. But, Captain, I'm not sure what we're dealing with here. This isn't just technology. It's something alive." Alina didn't respond immediately. She knew what Maya meant. The ship had a presence. It wasn't just a machine. It seemed to have a will of its own, an intelligence that surpassed anything the crew had encountered. As if to prove Maya's point, the lights in the control room flickered, and the ship hummed louder. Alina turned toward the central console, where a new message appeared on the screen. "Well, I'll see you home." Alina's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if the ship's AI was speaking to them, or if the ship itself had somehow come alive in a way that defied explanation. But there was no mistaking the message. It was clear. The ship had been waiting for them. "What is this?" Alina muttered, taking a step closer to the screen. "I don't know," Maya replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I've never seen anything like this. It's almost like it's alive, reacting to us." Alina's mind raced. Could it be that the ship was more than just an advanced weapon? Was it somehow aware of its surroundings, its creators, and even its new human occupants? Before she could contemplate this further, a new series of alerts flashed on the console, drawing her attention. The enemy ships, 20 strong, just as Jax had said, were closing in faster than expected. They were getting closer, their weapons charging. This wasn't just a skirmish anymore. This was the beginning of something much larger. "Jax," Alina snapped, "how much time do we have?" 5 minutes at most, he replied grimly, his fingers moving across the controls. "They're not wasting any time." Alina's mind raced. They couldn't afford another drawn-out battle. They needed to strike first. But how? The power of the ship was undeniable, but how could they be sure it would work again? They had no idea what other capabilities this vessel held in store. "Can we reprogram the weapon systems to give us more range?" Alina asked, her thoughts racing. "I'm trying," Maya said, her voice tense. "But I'm not sure if the systems are built for that kind of adjustment. This isn't conventional tech, Captain." Alina clenched her fists. She had no time for doubt. "Do it. I don't care if we burn out the system. We need to be ready." As the enemy ships drew nearer, the ship's hum grew louder, almost as if it, too, was preparing for what was to come. Alina felt a strange, heavy sensation in her chest. They had awakened something powerful, but they had no idea what it was truly capable of. And yet, she had no choice but to trust in it. The lights flickered once more, and the ship's AI came online again. This time, its voice, cold, mechanical, yet oddly comforting, echoed through the speakers. "We are ready." Alina felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know if the ship was speaking to her or the crew, or if it was speaking to something else entirely. But one thing was certain: the war had only just begun, and they had a weapon unlike anything else in the galaxy. With a final glance at her crew, Alina took a deep breath and gave the order. "Brace for impact," she said, her voice steady but full of resolve. "It's time to fight back." The enemy ships were closing in, their weapons charging, and Alina could feel the tension in the air. The crew worked swiftly, their movements almost mechanical as they prepared for the incoming battle. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder, as if the vessel itself was awakening to its true purpose. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more, something that had been dormant for too long, waiting for a moment like this. "Jax, what's the status on their approach?" Alina asked, her eyes fixed on the main view screen. "They're 5 minutes out, Captain," Jax replied, his voice tense. "They're coming in fast. The lead ship is a massive war cruiser. The rest are smaller support vessels, but don't underestimate them. They're heavily armed." Alina nodded, her gaze shifting to the strange alien ship they had found. This relic of a forgotten war. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, that it was somehow connected to their fate. The power it held was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, and they had barely begun to understand it. "Can we modify the weapon systems to strike first?" Alina asked, turning toward Maya. She needed a solid plan, and fast. Maya was already at the console, her fingers flying over the keys, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm working on it," she said, her voice strained. "But this tech, it's not like anything we've ever encountered. I think it's reacting to our presence, Captain. It's adapting to us." Alina's pulse quickened. If the ship could adapt to them, then it was possible, just possible, that they could use it to their advantage. But they had no time to test theories. The enemy was coming, and they needed every edge they could get. "Can we get a targeting lock on the lead ship?" Alina pressed. "I'm almost there," Maya replied, her fingers pausing for just a moment before continuing. "This is unlike any targeting system I've ever seen, Captain. The ship's AI is integrating everything we do. It's almost like it knows what we need." Alina swallowed hard. The ship's AI. Was it alive? Or was it simply responding to their commands? Either way, it was clear they had no other choice but to trust it. "Do it, Maya. Lock on and fire at the lead ship." "Locking now." Maya's voice trailed off as she worked. A moment later, the entire ship shuddered as the powerful weapon systems powered up. Alina's eyes flicked back to the view screen, her body tensing in anticipation. The enemy was almost in range. Just then, the ship's voice echoed through the comms again, cold and mechanical, yet strangely reassuring. "Tar GT Lockheed. We upon systems online." Alina didn't waste a second. "Fire." A brilliant flash of light erupted from the ship's weapons array. The energy beam shot out like a spear of pure destruction, cutting through the void of space with terrifying precision. The enemy ship, the massive war cruiser, didn't stand a chance. The beam struck its core, and for a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Then, in a flash of light, the cruiser erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, sending debris scattering in every direction. The crew watched in stunned silence as the pieces of the enemy ship drifted away, the battle seemingly over before it had even truly begun. But Alina knew better than to celebrate too soon. This was only the first wave. More ships were coming, and they had to be ready. "Keep moving," Alina ordered, her voice steady but urgent. "There are more ships out there. We need to prepare for the next wave." Jax nodded, his hands already working over the controls to change their course. "I'm taking us to the far side of the asteroid field," he said. "It'll give us some cover." Alina's gaze was fixed on the screen, watching as the remaining enemy ships closed in. There was no room for error. They had the advantage now, but it wouldn't last long. The ship they'd found, this ancient, powerful war vessel, was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, and they had no idea what it was truly capable of. "Captain," Maya called out, breaking Alina's thoughts. "I've accessed more of the ship's systems. There's something strange about the AI. It's not just a simple command interface. It's learning. It's evolving." "Learning?" Alina asked, turning to Maya. "What do you mean?" "It's adjusting to our commands, Captain. It's becoming more efficient, more autonomous," Maya said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's not just responding to us anymore. It's anticipating our needs." Alina's mind raced. Could this ship, this weapon, become an ally? Or would it become something they couldn't control? Before she could ask any more questions, the ship's systems went silent for a moment. And then the AI's voice filled the room again. "Ready for engagement." The ship had spoken. It was ready. Ready to fight. Ready to destroy. Alina's hand gripped the armrest of her chair. This was it. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about domination. "Target the second wave," Alina commanded, her voice low and determined. The ship responded immediately, its systems already engaged. The enemy fleet was not prepared for this new weapon, a ship that had been waiting for them, that had become a part of them. And now, they would see exactly what humanity was capable of when they were armed with the might of a forgotten ancient power. With a single command, the ship's weapons fired again, sending another burst of energy toward the incoming enemy ships. And this time, the galaxy would know that humanity had arrived. The enemy ships were relentless, but now they faced a foe unlike any they had ever encountered. Alina could see the enemy fleet coming into full view on the radar, a formidable force, the remnants of a once proud armada. But this time, they weren't facing the small, underpowered human ships they were used to. They were up against something different, something that had the power to turn the tide in a blink. The ship hummed with energy, its systems now fully integrated with the crew. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a living, breathing extension of their will. The AI, strange and powerful, had become more than just an interface. It had become a partner in their struggle. Alina couldn't quite understand it, but she didn't need to. All she needed was for it to fight. "Jax, take us out of the asteroid field," Alina ordered, her voice firm. "We need open space. We can't afford to be boxed in." Jax nodded, his hands flying over the controls as he steered the ship with precision. The massive alien vessel responded fluidly, almost as if it could sense his intentions, moving through space with a grace that defied its size. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot forward, leaving the debris of the asteroid field behind. "Captain, the enemy is closing in," Maya reported from the weapons console. "They're coordinating their attack, but they're still not ready for this ship. The weapons systems are fully locked onto their lead ship." Alina's grip on the armrest tightened. The lead ship was a beast, massive, with armor plating that seemed impenetrable. It was the heart of the enemy fleet, and if they destroyed it, the rest of the enemy ships would scatter. "Fire at will," Alina commanded, her voice steady. A brilliant streak of light shot out from the ship, cutting through the vast emptiness of space. The weapon fired once again, its energy almost blinding. The beam hit the enemy lead ship dead on. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a tremendous explosion erupted, a burst of light and debris so intense that it illuminated the surrounding darkness. The lead ship was gone. The crew stared in stunned silence at the view screen, watching as the wreckage floated into the abyss. Alina felt a rush of triumph, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. The remaining enemy ships were closing in fast, And they were more than just angry. They were desperate. "They're not retreating," Jack said, his voice tight. "They're coming for us. Full force." "Not for long," Elena replied. "Maya, how much power can we push through the weapon systems?" "I can push them to the limit," Maya answered quickly. "But we'll burn through the ship's energy reserves faster than we can replenish them. We need to make every shot count." Elena nodded. She didn't need to be told twice. They had one shot at this. Lock onto the next target. "I want that ship disabled, not destroyed," Elena said, her mind calculating quickly. "We need them to see what they're up against. We need to break their morale, not just their ships." Maya's fingers flew across the console, locked on, preparing the shot. The tension in the room was palpable. The ship's hum filled the silence, its weapon systems charging once again. Elena watched the enemy ships on the radar, their aggressive formations closing in. And then the shot was fired. This time, the energy beam was more controlled, more precise. It didn't destroy the enemy ship in a fiery explosion like the last one. Instead, the beam struck the midsection of the ship, sending out a shockwave that rippled through the entire vessel. The enemy ship jerked violently, its power systems flickering. It was a direct hit to its core systems. The ship began to list, its weapons falling silent as it drifted helplessly in space. "That should send a message," Elena said, her voice cold. She didn't care about their ships. She cared about winning. But just as Elena thought they might have the upper hand, the situation changed. The remaining ships didn't scatter. Instead, they began to maneuver into position, forming a tight, coordinated line. They were preparing for a final, desperate assault. "They're going to make one last push," Jack said, his voice full of warning. "They know they're outgunned, but they won't stop until we're destroyed." Elena's mind raced. It was clear they couldn't keep this up forever. They were low on energy, and the enemy fleet was still a serious threat. If they wanted to survive this, they needed to finish it. And fast. "Give me a full charge to the weapon systems," Elena said, her voice unwavering. "We end this now." Maya didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the console, rerouting power to the main weapon systems. "Charging to maximum. This is it, Captain." Elena gripped the armrest again, her pulse quickening. "All ships are locked on," Maya announced. "The energy is at max capacity. We're ready." The enemy fleet was now less than 2 minutes away, and the ship's ad voice came over the comms again, its cold, calculated tone reassuring in the chaos of battle. "Preparing final strike." Elena didn't flinch. She had only one chance. Fire. The energy beam erupted once again, but this time it was different. This wasn't just an attack. This was the culmination of everything the ship had been preparing for, the final destructive force that would shatter the enemy fleet once and for all. The beam shot through space like a comet, striking the lid ship in its entirety, tearing it apart in an instant. But the explosion didn't stop there. The shockwave spread, hitting the rest of the fleet, and within seconds, the remaining enemy ships were no more than debris. The room was silent for a moment, the full weight of what had just happened sinking in. They had won, not by luck, not by chance, but by sheer, unrelenting power. "We did it," Maya said softly, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Elena stood there for a moment, her eyes locked on the view screen. It was over. The enemy had been defeated. But as the stars stretched out before them, a new question began to form in Elena's mind. What had they really awakened in this ship? What power had they tapped into? And what would come next? The galaxy had just witnessed humanity's strength, but as Elena stared into the void, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface.